everyone, this is Kylie from Stampers Workshop. Thanks for joining me today. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator here in Australia, and today we're going to make a really cool card using the watercolour resist technique. We're casing a card from the Celebration catalogue, which ends on the 30th of September, so don't miss out. And we're going to use the Shaded Summer stamp set and the coordinating Summer Shadows dies, which could be yours for free with a qualifying order. To stitch with Whimsy die to die cut a panel for the front of the card. Now it only cuts in the stitch lines, so you'll have to use your paper trimmer to cut it to size. And I've just left a little border around the outside. Once you've done that, we're going to put it aside, grab some basic white in thick cardstock. We're going to use thick for the rest of the card. And we're just going to cut a panel that fits roughly inside the border of that die cut piece, the grey die cut piece. And we're going to copy it like the card that's in the catalogue and sort of put it off centre a little bit. Okay, now we're up to the fun technique part, but we start with the embossing. So grab your Shaded Summer stamp set, and we're actually going to use both of the floral images from this set. So get them all lined up. I'm going to actually do all of my stamping first, so I want everything to be ready. If you've still got your embossing buddy, don't get rid of it, keep it. Use any sort of powder tool that you have, because we're going to do a lot of embossing and it really does help not have those stray bits of embossing powder stick everywhere. Now we're going to stamp two of the smaller images. Now if your ink's not particularly juicy and wet, you might like to sort of stamp and emboss, but mine was fine. I decided to actually do all of my stamping first and then apply my embossing powder. But if you're finding that it's not working for you, just do one at a time. There's plenty of time. Okay, so now we pile on the embossing powder. It's white on white because we're going to have that white resist. Just pack up as you go, and that avoids all sorts of problems. Now I'm only going to show you a little bit of the embossing. I know it looks awesome, but I thought it might be a little bit hard to tell because we are doing white on white, but it looks so good and shiny, doesn't it? I know it's the Gateway drug. Sorry, I flashed those up a little bit too fast. We're using Shaded Spruce, Bumblebee and Flirty Flamingo to colour our images, and all you do is what you saw then. I just put tapped a little bit of the ink onto an acrylic block, grabbed my water painter, put down some water, mixed it all up and then painted, and you can see how it resists and that white just comes through. So we repeat it for all of the colours. Now you might find you have a few little drops of coloured ink on top of the white embossing. That's really easy to fix. Grab a clean cloth and just dab it off, just pat off that colour. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is not a watercolour paper, and whilst the thick cardstock will hold a little bit more, you don't want to go overboard with the water because it will peel and break down the fibres in it. So just take care when you're doing this step. How good does that Shaded Spruce look? When I first saw that in the recipe, I was like, oh, I don't know about this, but those colours look great. I was so impressed. Okay, now we're using those great dies and we're going to die cut it. My recommendation to you is let this dry first. I did not. I was keen to get this card made. I really wanted to see how it looked, and you'll see what happens. Also, if you haven't let it dry properly, perhaps don't hold it in place with a post-it note, because as you can see, I know it's a little bit off screen, but you can see there's a little bit of damage to this particular die cut. That's because it hadn't dried properly. I also got a little bit carried away with how hard I pressed down my post-it note, so that didn't help. Never mind, we can save this. For the sentiment, I actually chose Happy Birthday instead of what was originally on the sample. You can never have enough birthday cards, I have found, and all I've done is stamped it in basic grey. I also decided to give it a little bit more interest by using a stitched So Sweetly die. They're such fun dies. I love the scalloped edge with the little stitching in the middle. Okay, now we're up to the part where we have to assemble it, and we're going to start by just using seal. I tend to use a lot of adhesive. I really want everything to stay where I put it. Sometimes I wish I hadn't, because it doesn't stick quite where I don't put it quite where I think it would look best, but that's how it goes sometimes. You can also see right there, that's when I went, I really should have let this dry a bit better, because my panel was quite saturated there, so it hadn't finished drying. And so when I put the adhesive over the top, it peeled it up a little bit. Fortunately, I was able to leave it there, and no one can tell. And you can also tell right there where I point, that's where I ruined it when I was die cutting, but I've been able to position it so that the sentiment strip is going to cover it. I'll take some silver elegant trim and roll it into some lighter circles. I fussed around with this for ages before finally deciding just to use some glue dots to sort of anchor it in place, and I still fussed around with it for ages, but it doesn't look too bad by the end. I really did fuss around with that for a long time. Now we're adding our sentiment strip. As I said earlier, I do tend to go overboard with the dimensionals, but you don't need this many, but I tend to like it sort of, if I want it popped up, I want it completely popped up. So I stick down my sentiment strip, I make sure I cover that blemish, and then I fuss around with the silver twine again because I knocked it. And now we're going to pop up the panel onto the card base. Lots of Stampin' Dimensionals again. You don't need to use as many as I do, and you could actually just stick it directly down with seal onto the card base. The final touch are these gorgeous clear epoxy dots. They're great. And that's the last thing that we add to our card. It's a great technique. It's a great card. I hope you like it. After any of the products used in my card today, feel free to visit my online store, which you can get to by going to stampersworkshop.com. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.